laughter used to fill my soul. We were young and wild, thought love was enough. But I
Hey, Wings.
forever didn't wait on us. I said some things I can't take back, and you walked away, never looked back.
Hey, Sunshine, how are you?
I will love you until my final day. With my last breath, I will whisper your name. I wish I could have been the man you needed. You will always be the one.
Hey, Linda, welcome in. Happy Sunday. Hey, Kat, welcome in. Hi, Jasmine, how are you?
In that little black dress, in dreams that won't let me rest. Whiskey burns.
Oh, it's your favorite? Wonderful.
Can't erase
Hey, Amy.
the ghost of you I still
Oh, no. Well, hopefully this story settles your tummy down. Hey, Kelly, how are you?
hold you close
Maya, hello.
and make it right. I will love you until my final day. With my last breath, I will whisper your name. I wish I could have been
Hey, Tina.
the man you needed. You will always be
Hello, Rhonda. Welcome in.
that got away.
I've only read it once before, so.
If time could bend, I'd take your hand and build our dreams again in the sand.
Hey, Steph, welcome in.
Old heart knows
We'll hang out and listen to the story.
too late.
I'll get started here in about 5 or 7 minutes.
Some things you just
Well, hello from Salem, Oregon.
change. I will love you until my final day. With my last breath, I will whisper your name.
It seems to be popular with a lot of people.
I wish I could have been the man you need.
This is definitely from the beginning. I'll be doing tonight the first half of the book, and then tomorrow night will be the second half of the book.
One that got away. Yeah, you'll always be the one that got away.
Anna, the title of the song is The One That Got Away. It's something I'm working on. I was just working on it when I realized that it was time to go live. So here I am. I just figured I'd leave it playing. Thank you guys for indulging me. The regularly scheduled music here. Well, I hope everybody's had a good weekend. I spent a lot of time recording this weekend, so hopefully my voice is not worn out. Had stuff I was under a deadline to get done. Oh, you are? Awesome. Well, please let me know what you think. And if you like it, please, leave a good review. It's a fun story. Hey, Eddie, welcome in, brother. And how are you this evening? I have not read The Yearling. That is definitely one I have not read. Awesome. Well, Kim, there seems to be a lot of that going around. Seems to be a lot of people's favorites. Diana, hello. Jana Banana, yes, that seems to be everybody tonight. Shmate, yes, I am going to be reading the first half of the book tonight, and then the second half of the book tomorrow night. I've read this book a long time ago, so it'll almost be like rediscovering it for me. Deborah, welcome in. Good evening. Well, Anna, I'm glad you love the book. I hope you stick around with us for a little while. I'll be getting started here in a couple of minutes, just letting some people flow in. Hey, Sunshine, it's I'm not trying to jinx myself, but I really do feel like tonight is going to be another good night. My mother read these as a little girl. I loved them yeah. Well, hang around. It's one of those stories that holds up very well, even given as old as it is. Oh, Amy McCabe, I'm so glad to hear that. Brought you back to your childhood. Well, I hope you hang around and listen to the story with us. Well, hello. Baby Island. I'll have to look that one up. I want to say there was a movie made of this. I didn't do a whole lot of digging on this one. But, well, Carrie Ann, it's a book that is now public domain, but it was written almost 100 years ago. And a lot of people that came highly recommended from my community. And I'm looking forward to reading it tonight. Well, hello from Colorado. Well, Stephanie, I'm glad to be able to bring it to you again. Thank you guys for all the shares and the likes, and that really helps grow the channel, and it gets more people, gets my voice into more people's ear holes. So I suppose that's the goal. Well, hello from Fresno, California. Oh, Joy, that's wonderful to hear. Well, hello, Maryland. How are you? I know a few people from Maryland. You are right on time, Jenny. You are right on time. Awesome. Well, hello, East Texas. How are you? Oh, we got East Texas. We got Portland, Texas. Guys are following each other around. All right, one more minute and we'll get started. I am starting from the beginning of the book tonight, so you haven't missed anything if you just arrived. And tomorrow night I'll be doing the last half of the book. Hello, Cleveland, Ohio. Well, Maryland as well. Georgia, UK in the house. I always have to say that because my youngest daughter, she's 18 and she lives in Liverpool with her mom. From Bama. All right. Arkansas, we got the whole country in here. And then some. Though nothing will beat 2 weekends ago when a guy came in here who was down at one of the research stations, the New Zealand research station in Antarctica. I'm like, what? So I don't think anybody's going to beat that. It was like somebody was saying this the other day. Somebody was going to have to show up from, like listening from the ISS. The International Space Station that would be one of those where I'd go, okay, that's it. I quit. It's not going to get any better than that. It's not. I'm done. Malera, no, you did not miss the story. I actually have not started yet, which I am about to do, actually. It is time. Oh, man, I'm over here jaw-jacking. I better, gotta get started. Vancouver, Canada. I have a friend that my best friend lives in Vancouver, Washington. It's not the same thing, but that's okay. Yeah, if one of the astronauts on the ISS were to show up to my live and go, hey, listening from the ISS, you guys would literally see my brain melt, and I would probably just get up and walk away. That would be it. Like, nope, it's never going to get better than that. Alrighty. Your Grand Ratatouille. That's wonderful. This is one of those books that brings back a lot of childhood memories. And it's one of those things, one of the many things that makes doing this so worthwhile. When you can bring somebody back to their childhood, bring back memories of a loved one who's gone. Yeah. It actually, it means something. So, well, there are 270 of you in here, and I guess that means I should get started. All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Storytime with UndeadPapa. This is Sunday Night Bedtime Stories. Tonight we begin a beloved classic that has introduced generations of readers to adventure, independence, and the idea that home is not always a place. Sometimes it's the people beside you. Hey, crazy mama, welcome. 4 children, alone in the world, set out on a journey together. And in an abandoned boxcar, they discover that even in difficult times, there can still be wonder. So wherever you're listening from, dim the lights, sit back and relax, because story time is about to begin. This is The Boxcar Children by Gertrude Chandler Warner. That's a mouthful. The Flight. About 7 o'clock one hot summer evening, a strange family moved into the little village of Middlesex. Nobody knew where they came from, or who they were, but the neighbors soon made up their minds what they thought of the strangers, for the father was very drunk. He could hardly walk up the rickety front steps of the old tumble-down house, and his 13-year-old son had to help him. Toward 8 o'clock, a pretty, capable-looking girl of 12 came out of the house and bought a loaf of bread at the baker's. And that was all the villagers learned about the newcomers that night. Yes, welcome, Storytime Goblins. So happy to have you here. There are 4 children, said the bake shop woman to her husband the next day, and their mother is dead. They must have some money, for the girl paid for the bread with a $1 bill. Make them pay for everything they get, growled the baker, who was a hard man. The father is nearly dead with drink now, and soon they will be only beggars. Pleasant guy. This happened sooner than he thought. The next day the oldest boy and girl came to ask the bake shop woman to come over. Their father was dead. She went over willingly enough, for someone had to go, but it was clear that she did not expect to be bothered with 4 strange children, with the bakery on her hands and 2 children of her own. "Haven't you any other folks?" she asked the children. "We have a grandfather in Greenfield," spoke up the youngest child before his sister could clap her hand over his mouth. "Hush, Benny," she said anxiously. This made the bake shop woman suspicious. "What's the matter with your grandfather?" she asked. He doesn't like us," replied the oldest boy reluctantly. "He didn't want my father to marry my mother, and if he found us, he would treat us cruelly." "Did you ever see him?" "Jess has. Once she saw him." "Well, did he treat you cruelly?" asked the woman, turning upon Jess. "Oh, he didn't see me. He was just passing through where we used to live. My father pointed him out to me." "Where did you used to live?" went on the questioner, but none of the children could be made to tell. "We will get along right here, won't we, Henry?" declared Jess. "Indeed we will," said Henry. "I will stay in the house with you tonight," said the woman at last, "and tomorrow we will see what can be done." The 4 children went to bed in the kitchen and gave the visitor the only other bed in the house. They knew that she did not at once go to bed, but sat by the window in the dark. Suddenly they heard her talking to her husband through the open window. "They must go to their grandfather, that's certain," Jess heard her say. "Well, of course," agreed her husband. "Tomorrow we will make them tell us what his name is." Soon after that, Jess and Henry heard her snoring heavily. They sat up in the dark. "Mustn't we surely run away?" whispered Jess in Henry's ear. "Yes," whispered Henry. "Take only what we need most. We must be far off before morning, or they will catch us." Jess sat still for a moment, thinking, for every motion she made must count. "I will take both loaves of bread," she thought, "and Violet's little work-bag. Henry has his knife, and all Father's money is in my pocket." She drew it out and counted in the dark, squinting her eyes in the faint light of the moon. It amounted to nearly $4. "You'll have to carry Benny until he gets waked up," whispered Jess. "If we wake him up here, he might cry." She touched Violet as she spoke. "Shh, Violet, come, we're going to run away," she whispered. The little girl made no sound. She sat up obediently and tried to make out the dim shadow of her sister. "What shall I do?" she said, light as breath. "Carry this," said Jess, handing her the work-bag and a box of matches. Jess tipped over to the tin box on the table, drew out the 2 loaves of bread, and slipped them into the laundry bag. She peered around the room for the last time, then dropped 2 small clean towels and a cake of soap into the bag. "All right, pick him up," she said to Henry. Henry bent over the sleeping child and lifted him carefully. Jess took the laundry bag, turned the doorknob ever so softly, opened the door ever so slowly, and they tiptoed out in a ghostly procession. Jess shut the door with as much care as she had opened it, listened to the bakeshop woman's heavy snoring for a moment, and then they turned and picked their way without a sound to the country road. "She may wake up before morning, you know," whispered Henry. "We must do our fastest walking before then. If we can only get to another town before they find out we're gone, they won't know which way to go." Jess agreed, and they all walked briskly along in the faint moonlight. "How far can you carry Benny?" asked Violet. "Oh, at least a mile," said Henry confidently, although his arms were beginning to ache. Benny was 5 years old, and he was a fat, healthy boy. God, excuse me. Holy cow. I think we could walk faster if we woke him up, said Jess decidedly. We could each take his hand and almost carry him along. Henry knelt by the roadside and set the little fellow against his knee. Come on, Benny. You must wake up now and walk. Go away, Benny mumbled with his eyes shut, trying to lie down again. Let me try, Violet offered softly. Say, Benny, you know that little cinnamon bear ran away to find a nice warm bed for the winter? Now, you play your cinnamon, and Henry and Jess will help you along, and we'll find a bed. Violet's little plan worked. Benny was never too cross to listen to the wonderful stories his sister Violet could tell about Cinnamon Bear. He stood up bravely and marched along, yawning while his big brother and sister almost swung him between them. Not a soul passed between them on the country road. All the houses they saw were dark and still, and when the first faint streaks of morning light showed in the sky, all 4 children were almost staggering with sleep. I must go to sleep, Henry, murmured Jess at last. Little Benny was already asleep, and Henry was carrying him again. First place we come to, then, panted Henry. Violet said nothing, but she kept her eyes open. Finally, she caught Henry's sleeve. Couldn't we make that haystack do? She asked, pointing across a newly mown field. Indeed we could, said Henry, thankfully. What a big, enormous one it is. I was too sleepy to see it, I guess. And see how far away from the farmhouse and barn it is, too, echoed Jess. The sight gave them new courage. They climbed over 2 stone walls, got across a brook somehow with the heavy child, and arrived at the haystack. Henry laid his brother down and stretched his aching arms, while Jess began to burrow into the haystack. Violet, after a moment of watching her, did the same. Here's his nest, said Jess sleepily, taking her head out of the deep round hole she had made. Henry lifted the child into the opening and was pleased to see that he curled up instantly, smiling in his sleep. Jess pulled wisps of hay over the opening so that it was absolutely invisible, and then proceeded to dig out a similar burrow for herself. We can stay here just as long as we like, can't we, Henry? She murmured, digging with her eyes shut. We sure can, replied Henry. You're an old brick, Jess. Get in, and I'll pull the hay over the hole. Violet was already curled up in her nest, which was hidden so completely that Henry spoke to her to see if she were there. Then he wriggled himself backward into the haycock without stopping to hollow it out, pulled a handful of hay over his head, and laid his head on his arm. Just as he did so, he heard a heavy voice say, Now then, lass, get along. Then he heard the rumble of a milk wagon coming down a nearby lane, and he realized thankfully that they had hidden themselves just before the first farmer in the neighborhood had set off toward Middlesex with his milk cans. He will say he didn't meet us coming this way, thought Henry, so they will hunt for us the other way, and that will give us time to cover a lot more ground. He dropped asleep just as the roosters all over the valley began to answer each other. 537? Holy macaroni. Jeez. Well, welcome, everyone. Damn. Tonight's live stream is not sponsored by Ghost Energy Drinks. When you're dead inside and still have to go to work. Never mind. Ashley, welcome from the FYP. Martha, I'm doing all right. I'm frozen. Am I frozen? I don't look frozen. You know what we're going to have to do? If I'm frozen, we're just going to have to let it go. Sorry. I will move on to the next chapter. I don't worry about when I make mistakes. I'm not going to edit this for republication. It's just going to go up as is. But, hey, Nerd Unleashed, how are you? I am a teller of bad jokes, as I have often said. I got to make another introduction video because there's just going to be so many of you tonight. Good Lord. All right. Do I want to build a snowman? No. No, I don't. All right. Well, I'm going to get back to reading. There are no mistakes, only happy accidents, as Bob Ross would say. All right. The second night. The roosters crowed and the hens clucked. The farmer's wife began to get breakfast, and the 4 children slept on. Dinner time came and went, and still they slept. For it must be remembered that they had been awake and walking during the whole night. In fact, it was nearly 7 o'clock in the evening when they awoke. Luckily, all the others awoke before Benny. "Can you hear me, Jess?" said Henry, speaking very low through the wall of hay. "Yes," answered Jess softly. "Let's make one big room of our nests." No sooner said than done. The boy and girl worked quickly and quietly until they could see each other. They pressed the hay back firmly until they made their way into Violet's little room, and then she in turn groped until she found Benny. "Hello, little cinnamon," whispered Violet playfully. And Benny at once made up his mind to laugh instead of cry. But laughing out loud was almost as bad. So Henry took his little brother on the hay beside him and talked to him seriously. "You're old enough now, Benny, to understand what I say to you. Now listen. When I tell you to keep still after this, that means you're to stop crying if you're crying, or stop laughing if you're laughing, and be just as still as you possibly can. If you don't mind, you will be in danger. Do you understand?" "Don't I have to mind Jess and Violet, too?" asked Benny. "Absolutely," said Henry. "You have to mind us all, every one of us." Benny thought for a minute. "Can't I ask for what I want any more?" he said. "Indeed you can," cried Jess and Henry together. "What is it you want?" "I'm awful hungry," said Benny anxiously. Henry's brow cleared. "Good old Benny," he said. "We're just going to have supper, or is it breakfast?" Jess drew out the fragrant loaf of bread. She cut it with Henry's jackknife into 4 quarters, and she and Henry took the 2 crusty ends themselves. "That's because we have to be the strongest, and crusts make you strong," explained Jess. Violet looked at her older sister. She thought she knew why Jess took the crust, but she did not speak. We will stay here till dark. Then we'll go on with our journey," said Henry cheerfully. "I want a drink," announced Benny. "A drink you shall have," Henry promised, "but you'll have to wait till it's really dark. If we should creep out to the brook now, and anyone saw us—" He did not finish his sentence, but Benny realized that he must wait. He was much refreshed from his long sleep and felt very lively. Violet had all she could do to keep him amused, even with Cinnamon Bear and his 5 brothers. At last Henry peeped out. It was after 9 o'clock. There were lights in the farmhouse still, but they were all upstairs. "We can at least get a drink now," he said, and the children crept quietly to the noisy little brook not far from the haystack. "Cup?" said Benny. "No, you'll have to lie down and drink with your mouth," Jess explained. And so they did. Never did water taste so cool and delicious as it did that night to the thirsty children. When they had finished drinking, they jumped the brook, ran quickly over the fields to the wall, and once more found themselves on the road. "If we meet anyone," said Jess, "we must all crouch behind bushes until he is gone." They walked along in the darkness with light hearts. They were no longer tired or hungry. Their one thought was to get away from their grandfather if possible. "If we can find a big town," said Violet, "won't it be better to stay in that little town?" "Why?" asked Henry, puffing up the hill. "Well, you see, there are so many people in a big town, nobody will notice us." "And in a little village, everyone would be talking about us," finished Henry admiringly. "You've got brains, Violet." He had hardly said this when a wagon was heard behind them in the distance. It was coming from Middlesex. Without a word, the 4 children sank down behind the bushes like frightened rabbits. They could plainly hear their hearts beat. The horse trotted nearer and then began to walk up the hill. "If we hear nothing in Townsend," they heard a man say, we have plainly done our duty." It was the baker's voice. "More than our duty," said the baker's wife. "Tiring out a horse with going a full day from morning until night." There was silence as the horse pulled the creaky wagon. "At least we will go on to Townsend tonight," continued the baker, "and tell them to watch out. We need not go to Intervale, for they could never walk so far." "We are well rid of them, I should say," replied his wife. "They may not have come this way. The milkman did not see them, did he?" The baker's reply was lost, for the horse had reached the hilltop, where he broke into a canter. It was some minutes before the children dared to creep out of the bushes again. "One thing is sure," said Henry when he got his breath. "We will not go to Townsend." "And we will go to Intervale," said Jess. With a definite goal in mind at last, the children set out again with a better spirit. They walked until 2 o'clock in the morning, stopping often this time to rest and drink from the horses' watering troughs, and then they came upon a fork in the road, with a white signpost shining in the moonlight. "Townsend 4 miles, Intervale 6 miles, read Henry aloud. "Anyone feel able to walk 6 more miles?" He grinned. No one had the least idea how far they had already walked. "We'll go that way at least," said Jess finally. "That we will," agreed Henry, picking up his brother for a change and carrying him pigback. Violet went ahead. The new road was a pleasant, woody one, with grass growing in the middle. The children could not see the grass, but they could feel it as they walked. "Not many people pass this way, I guess," remarked Violet. Just then she caught her toe on something and almost fell, but Jess caught her. The 2 girls stooped down to examine the obstruction. "Hey!" said Jess. "Hey!" repeated Violet. "Hey!" cried Henry, coming up. "What did you say?" "It must have fallen off somebody's load," said Jess. "We'll take it with us," Henry decided wisely. "Load on all you can carry, Jess." For Benny, thought Violet to herself. So the odd little party trudged on for nearly 3 hours, laden with hay, until they found that the road ended in a cart path through the woods. "Oh dear," exclaimed Jess, almost ready to cry with disappointment. "What's the matter?" demanded Henry in astonishment. "Isn't the woods a good place to sleep? We can't sleep in the road, you know." "It does seem nice and far away from people," admitted Jess. "And it's almost morning." As they stood still at the entrance to the woods, they heard the rumble of a train. It roared down the valley at a great rate and passed them on the other side of the woods, thundering along toward the city. "Never mind the train, either," remarked Henry. "It isn't so awfully near, and even if it were, it couldn't see us." He set his brother down and peered into the woods. It was very warm. "Listen," said Benny. "Listen," echoed Violet. "More water," Benny cried, catching his big brother by the hand. "It's only another brook," said Henry with a thankful heart. "He wants a drink." The trickle of water sounded very pleasant to all the children as they lay down once more to drink. Benny was too sleepy to eat. Jess quickly found a dry spot thick with moss between 2 stones. Upon this moss the 3 older children spread the hay in the shape of an oval bed. Benny tumbled into it with a great sigh of satisfaction, while his sisters tucked the hay around him. "Pine needles up there, Jess," called Henry from the slope. Each of them quickly scraped together a fragrant pile for a pillow and once more lay down to sleep, with hardly a thought of fear. "I only hope we won't have a thunderstorm," said Jess to herself as she shut her tired eyes. And she did not open them for a long time, although the dark gray clouds piled higher and more thickly over the sleeping children. Good Lord, you guys are going to blow me right past 17,000. That's crazy. We're not that far away. Well, thank you all for being here. It's wonderful. I really appreciate all the likes and the shares. And yeah, because that really just gets my voice in more people's ear holes, which is the goal, you know. So. Hay is uncomfortable. I have, a long time ago, on a farm, slept on a pile of hay. It sucked. Like, no, just give me my bed back. Sorry. I think I was maybe 8. Shelter. When Jess opened her eyes, it must have been about 10 o'clock in the morning. She sat up and looked all around her. She could see dimly the opening where they had come into the woods. She looked around to see that her family was still safely by her. Then she looked up at the sky. At first she thought it must still be night. Then she realized that the darkness was caused by an approaching storm. "Oh, whatever shall we do? Whatever shall we do?" She got up and looked in every direction for shelter. She even walked quite a little way into the woods and down a hill, and there she stood, not knowing what to do next. "I shall have to wake Henry up," she said at last. "Only how I hate it. I hate to." As she spoke, she glanced into the forest, and her feet felt as if they were nailed to the ground. She could not stir. Faintly outlined among the trees, Jess saw an old freight or boxcar. Her first thought was one of fear. Her second, hope for shelter. As she thought of shelter, her feet moved, and she stumbled toward it. It really was a freight car. She felt of it. It stood on rusty, broken rails which were nearly covered with dead leaves. Then the thunder cracked overhead. Jess came to her usual senses and started back for Henry, flying like the wind. He was awake, looking anxiously overhead. He not noticed that Jess was missing. "Come," panted Jess. "I found a place. Hurry, hurry!" Henry did not stop to ask questions. He picked up Benny, telling Violet to gather up the hay, and then they ran headlong through the thick underbrush in Jess's wake, seeing their way only too well by the sharp flashes of lightning. "It's beginning to sprinkle," gasped Henry. We'll get there, all right," Jess shouted back. "It's not far. Be all ready to help me open the door when we get there." By sheer good fortune, a big tree stump stood under the door of the freight car, where the children never could have opened it. As it was, Jess sprang on the stump, and Henry, pausing to lay Benny down, did likewise. Together they rolled back the heavy door about a foot. "That's enough," panted Jess. "I'll get in, and you hand Benny up to me." "No," Henry said quietly. "I must see first if anyone is in there." "It will rain," protested Jess. "Nothing will hurt me." But she knew it was useless to argue with Henry, so she hastily groped in the bag for the matches and handed them to her brother. It must be confessed that Jess held her breath while Henry struck one and peered about inside the car. "All's well," he reported. "Come in, everybody." Violet passed the hay up to her brother and crawled in herself. Then Jess handed Benny up like a package of groceries, and taking one last look at the angry sky and waving trees, she climbed in after him. The two children managed to roll the door back so that the crack was completely closed before the storm broke. But at that very instant, it broke with a vengeance. It seemed to the children that the sky would split, so sharp were the cracks of thunder. But not a drop of rain reached them in their roomy retreat. They could see nothing at all, for the freight car was tightly made, and all outside was nearly as black as night. Through it all, Benny slept on. Presently the thunder grew fainter and rumbled away down the valley, and the rain spent itself. Only the drip from the trees on the top of the car could be heard. Then Henry ventured to open the door. He knelt on his hands and knees and thrust his head out. The warm sunlight was filtering through the trees, making golden pools of light here and there. The beautiful trees, pines and white birches and oaks, grew thickly around, and the ground was carpeted with flowers and wonderful ferns more than a yard high. But most miraculous of all was the miniature waterfall, small but perfect, where the same little brown brook fell gracefully over some ledges and danced away down the glen. In an instant, Jess and Violet were looking over Henry's shoulder at the pretty sight. "How different everything looks with the sun shining," exclaimed Jess. "Things will soon be dry at this rate." "It must be about noon," observed Henry, looking at the sun, and as he spoke, the faint echo of mill bells in the distance was heard. "Henry," said Jess sharply, "let's live here." "Live here?" repeated Henry dully. "Yes, why not?" replied Jess. "Nobody uses this car, and it's dry and warm. We're quite far away, and yet we are near enough to a town so we can buy things." "And we're near water," added Violet. Jess hugged her sister. "So we are, little mouse," she said. "The most important thing of all." "But," began Henry. "Please, Henry," said Jess excitedly. "I could make this old freight car into the dearest little house with beds and chairs and a table and dishes." "I'd like to live here too," said a determined little voice from the corner. "But I don't want to unless—" "Unless what?" asked Henry, panic-stricken. Unless I can have my dinner, Benny finished anxiously. We'll have something to eat right away, old fellow, said Henry, thankful it was no worse, for he himself was beginning to see what a cozy home the car really would make. Jess cut the last loaf of bread into 4 pieces, but alas, it was very dry. The children were so hungry that they tore it with their teeth like little dogs, but Benny was nearly crying. He did not actually cry, however, for just at the crucial moment, Violet started a funny story about Cinnamon Bear eating bread crusts out of the ash can. He ought to have milk, said Jess quietly to Henry. Oh, he shall have milk, replied Henry. I'll go down the railroad track to the town and get some. Jess counted out $1 in 10 dimes, handed it to Henry. By the time our $4 are gone, you will have some work to do, she said. All the same, Henry did not like to begin his trip. How I hate to leave you alone, Jess, he said miserably. Oh, don't worry, began Jess lightly. We'll have a surprise for you when you come back. You just wait and see. And she nodded her head wisely as Henry walked slowly off through the woods. The moment he was out of sight, she turned to Benny and Violet. Now, children, she said, what do you think we're going to do? Do you know what I saw over in the sunny part of the woods? I saw some blueberries. Oh, cried Benny, who knew what blueberries were. Can't we have some blueberries and milk? We certainly, began Jess, but the sentence never finished, for a sharp crack of dry leaves was heard. Something was moving in the woods. Well, Care Bear Eats, I appreciate that. I'm glad it made your day. It's what I live for. I'm not kidding. Really, for true. I do. It makes me very happy to hear. DK, how you doing, brother? Thank you, Irene. I appreciate that. Oh my God, there's 600 people in here. Good Lord. A new home. Keep still, whispered Jess. Benny obeyed. The 3 children were as motionless as stone images, huddled inside the freight car. Jess opened her mouth in order to breathe at all. Her heart was thumping so wildly. She watched like a cat through the open door in the direction of the rustling noise, and in a moment the trembling bushes parted, and out crawled a dog. He was an Airedale, and was pulling himself along on 3 legs, whimpering softly. Jess drew a long breath of relief and said to the children, It's all right, only a dog, but he seems to be hurt. At the sound of her voice, the dog lifted his eyes and wagged his tail feebly. He held up his front paws. Poor doggy, murmured Jess soothingly as she clambered out of the car. Let Jess see your poor lame foot. She approached the dog carefully, for she remembered that her mother had always told her never to touch a strange dog unless he wagged his tail. But this dog's tail was wagging. I can talk, sure. But this dog's tail was wagging, certainly, so Jess bent over without fear and took to look at the paw. An exclamation of pity escaped her when she saw it, for a stiff, sharp thorn had been driven completely through one of the cushions of the dog's foot, and around it the blood had dried. I guess I can fix that, said Jess briskly, but taking the thorn out is going to hurt you, old fellow. The dog looked up at her as she laid his paw down, and licked her hand. "Come here, Violet and Benny," directed Jess. She took the animal gently in her lap and turned him on his side. She patted his head and stroked his nose with one finger and offered him the rest of her bread crust, which she had put in her apron pocket. The dog snapped it up as if she were nearly starved. Then she held the soft paw firmly with her left hand and pulled steadily on the thorn in her right hand. The dog did not utter a sound. He lay motionless in her lap until the thorns suddenly let go and lay in Jess's hand. "Good, good!" cried Violet. "Wet my handkerchief," Jess ordered briskly. Violet did so. Dipping it in the running brook, Jess wrapped the cool, wet folds around the hot paw and gently squeezed it against the wound, the dog, meanwhile, trying to lick her hands. "We'll surprise Henry, won't we?" laughed Benny delightedly. "Now we got a dog." "To be sure," said Jess, struck with the thought. "But that isn't what I intended for a surprise. You know, I was intending to get a lot of blueberries and maybe find some old dishes in a dump or something." "Can't we look while you hold the dog?" asked Violet anxiously. "Of course you can, pet," said Jess. "Look over there by those rocks." Benny and Violet scrambled through the underbrush to the place Jess pointed out and investigated. But they did not hunt for long, for the blueberries were so thick that the bushes almost bent over with their weight. "Oh, Jessie!" screamed Benny. "You never saw so many in your life. What'll we pick 'em into?" "Come and get a clean towel," said Jess, who noticed that Benny was already picking into his own mouth. But that's just as well, she thought, because he won't get so hungry waiting for the milk. She watched the two children a moment as they dropped handfuls of bluish globes on the towel. Then she carefully got up with her little patient and went over and sat down in the center of the patch. The berries were so thick she did not have to change her position before the towel held over a quart. "Oh, dear," sighed Jess. "I wish I could hunt for some dishes so we could have blueberries and milk." "Never mind tonight," said Violet. "We can just eat a handful of berries and then take a drink of milk when Henry comes." But it was even better than that. For when Henry came, he had 2 bottles of milk under one arm, a huge loaf of brown bread under the other, and some golden cheese in waxed paper in his pocket. But you should have seen Henry stare when he saw what Jess was holding. "Where in the world?" began the boy. "He came to us," volunteered Benny. "He came for a surprise for you. He's a nice doggy." Henry knelt down to look at the visitor, who wagged his tail. "It wouldn't be a bad thing to have a watchdog," said Henry. "I worried about you all the time I was gone." "Did you bring some milk?" inquired Benny, trying to be polite, but looking at the bottles with longing eyes. "Bless his heart," said Jess, struggling to her feet with the dog. "We'll have dinner right away, or is it supper?" "Call it supper," suggested Henry, "for it's the last thing we'll have to eat today." "And then tomorrow we'll start having 3 meals every day," laughed Jess. It was certainly a queer meal. Whatever it was, Jess, who liked above all things to be orderly, spread out the big gray laundry bag. Really, TikTok? Stupid TikTok. I am not a bot. But we love the TikTok shop. It was certainly a queer meal, whatever it was. Jess, who liked above all things to be orderly, spread out the big gray laundry bag on the pine needles for a tablecloth. The brown loaf was cut by a very excited little hostess into 5 thick squares, the cheese into 4. "Dogs don't eat cheese," Benny remarked cheerfully. The poor little fellow was glad of it, too, for he was very hungry. He could hardly wait for Jess to set the milk bottles in the center of the table and heap the blueberries in 4 little mounds, one at each place. "I'm sorry we haven't cups," Jess remarked. "We'll just have to drink out of the same bottle." "No, we won't," said Henry. "We'll drink half of each bottle so that will make at least 2 things to drink out of." "Oh, good for you, Henry," said Jess, much relieved. "You and Benny use one, and Violet and I will use the other." So the meal began. "Look, Benny," directed Henry, "eat a handful of blueberries, then take a bite of brown bread, then a nibble of cheese, now a drink of milk." It's good," mumbled Benny to himself all through the meal. You must not imagine that the poor wandering dog was neglected, for Jess fed him gently as he lay in her lap, poking morsels of bread into his mouth and pouring milk into her own hand for him to lap up. When the meal was over and exactly half of each bottle of milk remained, Jess said, "We're going to sleep on beds tonight. Just as soon as we get our beds made, we're all going to be washed." "That'll be fun, Benny," added Violet. "We'll wash our paws in the brook just the way Cinnamon does." "First, let's gather armfuls of dry pine needles," ordered Jess. "Get those on top that have been lying in the sunshine." Jess laid the dog down on a bed of moss as she spoke, and started energetically to scoop up piles of the fragrant needles. Soon a pile as high as her head stood just under the freight car door. "I think we have enough," she said at last. Taking the scissors from Violet's workbag, she cut the laundry bag carefully into 2 pieces, saving the cord for a clothesline. One of the big squares was laid across Benny's hay and tucked under. That was the softest bed of all. Violet's apron and her own, she cut off. Violet's apron and her own, she cut off at the belt. "I'll sleep next to Benny," said Henry, "with my head up by the door. Then I can hear what is going on." A big pile of pine needles was loaded into the freight car for Henry's bed and covered with the other half of the laundry bag. The remainder of the needles Jess piled into the farthest corner of the car for herself and Violet. "We'll all sleep on one side so we can call it the bedroom." "What'll be the other side?" inquired Benny. "The other side?" repeated Jess. "Let me think. I guess that'll be the sitting room, and perhaps some of the time the kitchen. On rainy days, maybe the dining room," added Henry with a wink. "Couldn't it be the parlor?" begged Benny. "Certainly, the parlor. We forgot that," agreed Jess, returning the wink. She was covering the last two soft beds with the 2 aprons. "The tops of these aprons are washcloths," she said severely. Then, armed with a big cake of soap, she led the way to the brook. The dog watched them anxiously, but when Jess said, "Lie still," he obeyed. From the moment Jess drew the thorn from his foot, he was her dog, to obey her slightest command and to follow her wherever she went. The clean, cool brook was delightful even to Benny. The children rolled up their sleeves and plunged their dusty arms into the waters, quarreling good-naturedly over the soap, and lathering their stained faces and necks with it. When they were well rinsed with clear water, they dried themselves with the towel. Then Jess washed both towels nicely with soap, rinsed them, and hung them on the clothesline of tape, which she had stretched between 2 slender birch trees. They flapped lazily in the wind. "Looks like home already, Jess," said Henry, smiling at the washing. The tired children clambered into the bedroom, Jess coming last with the wounded dog. "We'll have to leave the door open. It's so hot," said Henry, lying down with a tired sigh. And in less than 10 minutes, they were fast asleep, dog and all. Asleep at 6 o'clock. Asleep without naming the dog, without locking the door, without fear, for this was the first night in 4 that they had been able to go to sleep at night, as children should. Just a reminder, we'll be getting halfway through the book tonight, and we'll be finishing the book tomorrow night. Same bat time, same bat channel. We'll be, I'm not done yet, so we're only 25% through. We got to get to 50 first. I'll be on till 11 o'clock tonight, 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then I'll be back on tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, going again till 11. It's my normal time for those of you that are just joining us for the first time. So, I'm glad I'm excited you found me too. 700, we are, holy cow, we are 14 followers away. Holy crap. Okay, now we're 3 followers away. We just crossed 17,000. I'm going to cry. No, seriously, this is amazing. I just saw somebody ask a question here. Mandy B0727. This channel is all about telling stories. I go live 4 times a week and read stories. So Sundays and Mondays are generally family-friendly children's chapter books, and Wednesday and Friday are more for the dark and mysterious. We do horror tales, science fiction, thriller stuff. I've read everything from Edgar Allan Poe to Stephen King, and it's really fun if you're into that kind of thing. But like I said, Sundays and Mondays are for children's books. We've done things like, let's see, we did very early on, we did Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. We did Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. We've done Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. We did Charlotte's Web. We did Bridge to Terabithia. We've done Winnie the Pooh, The Wizard of Oz, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. We just did last week, we did James and the Giant Peach, which was absolutely awesome. Yeah, you know how long it would take me to read The Stand? We'd be doing this for like the next 6 months. It's a fantastic book. But, and this week we're doing the Boxcar Children. I haven't decided what we're going to do next week, so I'll leave that as a surprise. All right, let me get back to the book. Wow, there are 735 people. Good Lord. Well, Leslie, follow. And I will be bringing some audience favorites back in the next couple of months, because we'll be doing. I might do the Phantom Tollbooth again, because that is absolutely one of my favorite books. So, anyway, let us return to the book. Housekeeping. The next morning, Jess was up before the others, as was fitting for a little housekeeper. That is, she was first, if we accept the dog, who had opened one eye instantly every time his little mistress stirred in her sleep. He sat watching gravely in the door of the car as Jess descended to get breakfast. She walked from the little waterfall quite a distance down the brook, looking at it with critical eyes. "This will be the well," she said to herself, regarding a small but deep and quiet basin just below the falls. Below that she found a larger basin, lined with gravel with flat stones and surrounding it. "This will be the wash tub," she decided, "and now I must go back to the refrigerator." This was the strangest spot of all, for behind the little waterfall was a small, quiet pool in which Jess had set the milk bottles the night before. Not a drop of water could get in, but all night long The cool running water had surrounded the bottles. They were now fairly icy to the touch. Jess smiled as she drew them out. "Is it good?" asked Benny's voice. There he sat in the door of the car, swinging his legs, his arm around the shaggy dog. "It's delicious," declared Jess, "cold as ice." She climbed up beside him as she spoke, bringing the breakfast with her. The other two children sat up and looked at it. "Today, Jess," began Henry, "I will go back to town and try to get a job mowing lawns or something. Then we can afford to have something besides milk for breakfast." Milk suited Benny very well, however, so the older children allowed him to drink rather more than his share. Henry did not waste any time talking. He brushed his hair as well as he could without a brush, rolled down his sleeves, and started for town with the second $1. "Glad you've got a dog, Jess," he called back as he waved his straw hat. The children watched him disappear around the curve, then turned to Jess expectantly. They were not mistaken. Jess had a plan. "We'll explore," she began mysteriously. "We'll begin here at the car and hunt all over these woods until we find a dump." "What's a dump?" inquired Benny. "Oh, Benny," answered Violet, "you know what a dump is. All old bottles and paper and broken dishes." "And wheels?" asked Benny interestedly. "Will there be any old wheels?" "Yes, maybe," assented Violet. "But cups, Benny. Think of drinking milk out of a cup again." "Oh, yes," said Benny politely, but it was clear that his mind was centered on wheels rather than cups. The exploring party started slowly down the rusty track, with the dog hopping happily on 3 legs. The fourth paw, nicely bandaged with Jess's handkerchief, he held up out of harm's way. "I think this is a spur track," said Jess. "They built it in here so they could load wood on the cars, and then when they had cut all the wood, they didn't need the track anymore." This explanation seemed very likely, for here and there were stumps of trees and decaying chips. Violet took note of these chips and remembered them some days later. In fact, both girls kept their eyes open and pointed out things of interest to each other. "Remember those logs, Violet, if we should ever need any," said Jess, pointing. "Blackberry blossoms," returned Violet briefly, turning one over gently with her foot. "Big flat stones," remarked Jess later on, as they came upon a heap of them. Here the track came out into the open sunshine, and broken pieces of rail showed clearly where it had joined the main track at some time in the past. And here, from the top of the wooded hill, the children could plainly see the city in the valley. They walked along the track, picking out a church steeple here and there, forgetting for a moment the object of their search. "There's a wheel!" Benny cried triumphantly from behind. The girls looked down, and with a glad cry of surprise, Jess recognized a dump at the foot of the hill. They found it not composed entirely of ashes and tin cans, either, although both of these were there in great profusion. It was a royal dump, containing both cups and wheels. "Oh, Benny," she cried, "if it hadn't been for you!" She hugged him, wheel and all, and began turning over the rubbish with great delight. "Here's a white pitcher, Jess," Violet called, holding up a perfect specimen with a tiny chip in the nose. "Here's a big white cup," said Jess delightedly, laying it aside. "Want a teapot, Jessie?" inquired Benny, offering her an enormous blue-enameled affair without a handle. "Yes, indeed," cried Jess. "We can use that for water. I've found 2 cups and a bowl already. And Violet, we ought to be looking for spoons, too." Violet pointed without speaking to her little pile of treasures. There were 5 iron spoons covered with rust. "Wonderful," pronounced Jess with rapture. Indeed, it is doubtful if collectors of rare and beautiful bits of porcelain ever enjoyed a search as much as did these adventurers in the dump heap. Benny actually found 4 wheels exactly alike, probably from the same cart, and insisted upon carrying them back. To please him, Jess allowed him to add them to the growing pile. "Here's a big iron kettle," observed Violet, "but we won't really cook with a fire, will we, Jess?" "We'll take it back, though," replied Jess with a knowing look. "We could pile lots of dishes in it." They could and did, but not until after Benny had discovered his beloved pink cup. It was a tea-party cup of those bright rose color with a wreath of gorgeous roses on it, and a little shepherdess giving her lamb a drink from a pale blue brook. It had a perfectly good handle, gold into the bargain. Its only flaw was a dangerous crack through the lamb's nose and front feet. Jess made a cushion for it out of grass and laid it on top of a kettle full of treasures. All the things, even the wheels, were laid on a wide board which the 2 girls carried between them. Can you imagine the dishwashing when the gay party returned to the freight car? Children do not usually care for dishwashing, but never did a little boy hand dishes to his sister so carefully as Benny did. On their hands and knees beside the clear, cool little wash tub, the 3 children soaped and rinsed and dried their precious store of dishes. Jess scoured the rust from the spoons with sand. "There," she said, drying the last polished spoon. The children sat back and looked admiringly at their own handiwork. But they did not look long. There was too much to be done. "Jess!" exclaimed Violet. "I'll tell you!" Violet seldom spoke so excitedly. Even Benny turned round and looked at her. "Come and see what I noticed inside the car last night." Both children followed her and peered in at the door. "See on the wall right on the other door, Jess?" Now all Jess could see were 2 thick chunks of wood nailed securely to the closed door opposite the open one. But she whirled around and round as fast as she could, clapping her hands. When she could get her breath, however, she skipped over to the board they had carried, dusted it nicely, and laid it carefully across the 2 wooden projections. It was a perfect shelf. "There," said Jess. The children could hardly wait to arrange the shining new dishes on the shelf. Violet quickly gathered some feathery white flowers, a daisy or 2, and some maidenhair ferns, which she arranged in a glass vase filled with water from the well. This she put in the middle with the broken edge hidden. "There," said Jess. "You said there 3 times, Jessie," remarked Benny contentedly. "So I did," replied Jess, laughing. "But I'm going to say it again." She pointed and said, "There." Henry was coming up the path. Holy crap. We got 45 minutes left. My God. 324,000 likes. Holy crow. 700. My brain is going to melt. Seriously. All right, let us continue. Earn a living. Henry had all sorts of packages under his arm and in his pockets, but he wouldn't open them or tell a thing about his adventures until dinner was ready. He said, "Jess, you're a wonder," he exclaimed when he saw the dishes and the shelf. The big kettle was selected, and they all began to pick blueberries as fast as they could, telling Henry, meanwhile, all about the wonderful dump. At last the tablecloth was spread, and Henry unwrapped his parcels before the whole excited family. "I bought some more brown bread," he said, producing the loaves, "and some more milk, in the same little store where I went yesterday. It's kept by a little old man, and it's called a delicatessen shop. He has everything in his store to eat. I bought some dried beef because we can eat it in our fingers, and I bought a big bone for the dog." "His name is Watch," Jess interrupted. "All right," said Henry, accepting the name. "I bought a bone for Watch." Watch fell on the bone as if he were famished, which indeed he nearly was. It was a rapturous moment when Jess poured the yellow milk into 4 cups and bowls, and each child proceeded to crumble the brown bread into it with a liberal scattering of blueberries. And then they ate it with spoons. Nobody was able to speak a word for several minutes. Then Henry began slowly to tell his tale. "I earned $1 this morning," he began proudly. "I walked along the first shady street I came to. Nice houses, you know. And there was a fellow out mowing his lawn. He's a nice fellow, too, I can tell you. A young doctor." Henry paused to chew blissfully. "He was pretty hot," Henry went on, "and just as I came to the gate, his telephone rang. I heard it and called after him and asked if he didn't want me to finish it up." "And he said he did," cried Jess. "Yes," he said. "For goodness sake, yes." Henry answered, smiling. "You see, he wasn't used to it. So I mowed the lawn and trimmed the hedges, and he said he never had a boy trim it as well as I did. And then he asked me if I wanted a steady job." "Oh, Henry!" cried Violet and Jess together. "I told him I did, so he said to come back this afternoon any time I wanted, or tomorrow. He said he didn't care just when, any time." Henry gave his cup a last polish with his spoon and set it down dreamily. "It's a pretty house," he went on, "and there's a big garden behind it, a vegetable garden, and an orchard behind that, a cherry orchard. You ought to see the cherry trees. Well, when I was trimming the hedges near the kitchen door, the cook came and watched me. She's a fat Irish woman." Henry laughed at the recollection. "She asked me if I liked cookies. Oh, if you had smelled them baking, you'd have died laughing, Benny. Delicious. So I said I did, and she passed me out one, and when she went back, I put it in my pocket." "Did she see you?" asked Jess anxiously. "Oh, no," said Henry confidently, "for I carefully chewed away for a long time on nothing at all." Benny began to look fixedly at Henry's pocket. It certainly was still rather bulgy. "When I went, the doctor paid me $1, and the cook gave me this bag." Henry grinned as he tossed the paper bag to Jess. Inside were 12 ginger cookies with scalloped edges, smelling faintly of cinnamon and sugar. "I'm going to keep track of everything I earn and spend," said Henry, watching Jess as she handed around the cookies with reverence. "How are you going to write without a pencil?" asked Jess. "There are pieces of tailor's chalk in my work bag," said Violet. Henry gave his younger sister a gentle pat as she returned with her work bag and fished for the chalk. While the girls rinsed the empty dishes in the brook and stored away the food for supper, Henry was beginning his cash account on the wall of his bedroom. It was never erased, and Henry often now looks at the account with great affection. Soon the girls came to inspect it. Meanwhile, Benny looked on with great delight as Watch tried to bury his bone with only one paw to dig with. "Earned $1, cash on hand $3.85, read Jess aloud. Below he had written, milk 24 cents, bread 10 cents, bread 20 cents, cheese 10 cents, milk 24 cents, beef 20 cents, bone 5 cents, cloth 10 cents. "Cloth!" exclaimed Violet. "What on earth?" Henry laughed a little and watched her face as he drew out his last package and handed it to her. "I thought we ought to have a tablecloth," he explained. "So I got a yard at the 10-cent store, but it isn't hemmed, of course." With a cry of delight, Violet unwrapped the brown cloth with its edge of blue. Her clever fingers already evening the two ends, she was never so happy as when with a needle. Henry set off again with a light heart. Here was one sister curled up happily against a big tree, setting tiny stitches into a very straight hem. Here was another sister busily gathering pliant twigs into a bundle for a broom with which to sweep the stray pine needles from the house. And here was Benny, curled up, sound asleep, on the ground with the dog for a pillow. It was quite late when Henry returned. In fact, it was nearly 7 o'clock, although he didn't know that. Several treasures had been added in his absence. The broom stood proudly in the corner with a slim stick for a handle. The new tablecloth had been washed and was drying on the line. And Jess, who had decided to wash one garment a day, had begun with Benny's stockings. When Henry came up, they were being put on again, with much pride by Benny himself. Violet had darned a big hole in each. This time, Henry himself could not wait to tell his sisters what he had. He passed them the package at once, with shining eyes. "Butter!" cried Jess with a radiant face. It was butter, cool and sweet. Nobody remembered that they had been a week without tasting either butter or meat when at last they sat down to their royal supper. "These are trick spoons," explained Henry. "Turn them upside down and use the handle, and they become knives." They were knives. Anyway, they were used to spread the delicious morsels of butter on the brown loaf. With dried beef and a cookie for dessert, who could ask for better fare? Certainly not the 4 children, who enjoyed it more than the rarest dainties. "I washed the doctor's automobile this afternoon," Henry related. "Then I washed both piazzas with the hose, and tomorrow I'm going to hoe in the garden. Oh, wouldn't I love to have a nice cold swim in that brook?" Henry was hot and sticky, certainly. He looked with longing eyes at the waterfall as he finished the last crumbs of his supper. "I wonder if we could fix up a regular swimming pool," he said, half to himself. "Of course we could," replied Violet, as if nothing were too difficult. "Jess and I know where there's big logs and big flat stones." "You do, eh?" said Henry, staring at his gentle little sister. "Well, why couldn't we, Henry?" struck in Jess. "Just a little below here is a sort of pool already, only not big enough." "Well, we sure could," cried Henry. "Someday I'll stay home from work, and we'll see." Nobody realized that Henry had been working only one day in all. Anyway, it seemed as if they had always lived in the comfortable home in the freight car, with Henry plying back and forth from the city each day, bringing them new surprises. Henry went to bed that night with a head full of plans for damming up the brook. He almost shouted when he thought suddenly of Benny's wheels. He began to plan to make a cart to carry the heavy stones to the brook. And that was when he first noticed that Watch was not asleep. He could see his eyes shining red in the darkness. It must have been around 11 o'clock. Henry reached over and patted his rough little back. Watch licked the hand but didn't close his eyes. Suddenly, he began to growl softly. "Shh," said Henry to the dog. Now thoroughly startled, he sat up. Jess sat up. They did not hear a sound. "Better shut the door," breathed Henry. Together they rolled the door very slowly and softly until it was shut. Still, they did not hear anything. But still, Watch continued his uneasy growling. Violet and Benny slumbered on. Jess and Henry sat motionless with their hearts in their mouths. "Supposing it was some other tramp," whispered Jess. "Somebody else that wanted to sleep here." "Watch would bite him," whispered Henry briefly. Jess never knew what confidence Henry had in the faithful dog. Then a branch cracked sharply outside. Watch barked out loud. Jess smothered the dog instantly in her arms, but it had been a bark. It was loud, clear, and unmistakable. "That settles it," thought Henry. "Whoever it is knows there's someone in here." And the boy waited with the new broom in his hand, expecting every moment to see the door opened from the outside. But nothing happened. Nothing at all. The children sat in perfect silence for at least a half hour, and nothing more was heard. Watch sniffed a little when Henry finally rolled the door open again, but then he turned around 3 times, laid down beside Jess, apparently satisfied at last. Taking the dog's conduct as a sure guide, Henry composed himself for sleep. "It must have been a rabbit or something," he said to Jess. The occupants of the freight car slept peacefully until morning. Good Lord. There's like 825 people in here. What? You guys are amazing. Oh my goodness. If we keep this up, we're going to blow right past 18,000. That would be kind of wild. At home. Jess and Henry had a short committee meeting the next morning before the others awoke. It was agreed that nobody should be allowed to stray off into the woods alone, not even the dog. And with much mystery, Henry left some orders with all of them as to what they should build for him during the morning. "What for?" asked Benny. "Shan't tell, old fellow," teased Henry. "You just build it, and I'll see you later." So Henry walked briskly through the woods, feeling sure that the noise in the night had been made by a rabbit. Having no watch, Henry made a slight mistake by appearing at the young doctor's before 8 o'clock. He was just in time to meet the doctor coming in from a night call. If Henry had not been so eager to begin work, he would have noticed how the young man's dark eyes examined him from head to foot, even to his plastered hair, wet with brook water. It was not the doctor who directed his work, but the doctor's mother, the sweet-faced Mrs. McAllister, whose heart was centered on her son and her vegetable garden. Her heart warmed to the boy when she saw how carefully he thinned out the carrots, which had been sadly neglected. "I have been so busy," she declared, "that I have actually stayed awake nights worrying about those carrots. There, see that?" She pulled out a fairly good-sized carrot as she spoke. It had to come out, for it was much too near its neighbors. In fact, when Henry had thinned out half a row, he had quite a little pile of eatable carrots, each as large as his thumb. When Mrs. McAllister saw Henry deftly press the earth back again around the carrots which remained standing, she left him quietly with a smile. Here was a gardener whom she could trust. Henry worked steadily in the hot sun, completing row after row of carrots, parsnips, and onions. When the mill bells rang at noon, he worked on, without noticing that his employer was again watching him. When he did at last notice her, he asked her, smiling, what she wanted done with the things he had pulled up. "Oh, throw them away," she said indifferently. Toss them over into the orchard, and sometime we'll burn them when they get dry." "Do you mind if I take them myself?" asked Henry hesitatingly. "Oh, no," said Mrs. McAllister cordially. "Have you chickens? That will be fine." Henry was thankful that she went right along without waiting for an answer, but in a way, he did have chickens, he thought. "You must stop working now," she said. "Any time you want to do something, there will be a place for you here." She gave him $1 bill and left the delighted boy with the piles of precious little vegetables. As long as Henry expected to return so soon, he hastily selected an orderly bunch of the largest of the carrots and the smallest of the onions. He added a few of the miniature parsnips for good measure. They looked like doll's vegetables. When Henry walked down the drive with his bouquet, he would have seen a face at the window if he had looked up. But he did not look up. He was too anxious to get to the little old man's shop and order his meat. So it happened that Henry walked in upon his little family at about 2 o'clock with all the materials for a feast. The feast could not be made ready before night. Jess hastened to explain to Benny, who was perfectly satisfied anyway with bread and milk in his pink cup. "Your building is done," Benny informed his brother. "I builded lots of it." "He really did," agreed Violet, leading the way to the sunny open spot a trifle behind the house. The building was a fireplace. With an enormous amount of labor, the children had made quite a hollow at the base of a rock. This was lined completely with flat stones. More flat stones had been set on the end to keep out the wind. On top of the stones lay the most wonderful collection of firewood that you can imagine, all ready to light. There were chips and bits of crumpled paper, pine cones, and dry twigs. Beside the big rock was a wood pile. The children had apparently been working like beavers all morning. Jess had found a heavy wire in the dump and had fastened it between 2 trees. On the wire, the kettle swung merrily. "Fine, fine!" shouted Henry when he saw it. I couldn't have done it so well myself." He honestly believed it. "We have dinner at night here," observed Jess impressively. "What did you buy?" When the girls saw the tiny vegetables, they began with cries of delight to cut them from their stalks with Henry's knife and a broken paring knife. They scrubbed them in the washtub, filled the kettle half full of water from the well, and proceeded in great excitement to cut the raw meat into cubes. When this had been dropped into the kettle, Henry lighted the fire. It burned frantically as if it were trying to encourage the stew to do its best. Violet laid the tin plate over the top for a cover, and they all stood by to hear the first bubble. Soon the savory stuff in the kettle began to boil in good earnest. Watch sat down gravely near it and gave an approving sniff at intervals. "Keep it boiling," advised Henry as he departed again. "When I come home tonight, I'll bring some salt, and for mercy's sake, don't get on fire." Violet pointed silently at the big teapot. The little girl had filled it with water in case of emergency. "That's if Benny catches on fire," she explained, "or Watch." Henry laughed and went on his way happily enough. He wished he might share the delightful task of keeping the fire going and sniffing the stew. But when he found out his afternoon's duties, he changed his mind abruptly. "Think you can clean up this garage?" asked Dr. McAllister quizzically when he appeared. Henry flashed a look around the place and met the young man's eyes with a smile. It did need cleaning rather badly. When its owner purred out in his high-powered little car, Henry drew a long breath and began in earnest. He opened all the chests of drawers to begin with. Then he arranged all the tools in the largest deep drawer, and with the long-handled brush and a can of black paint that was nearly dry, he labeled the drawer Tools with neat lettering. Another drawer he lettered Nails, and assorted its contents into a few of the many boxes that were lying around. He folded up the robes he found, swept off the shelves and arranged the oil cans in orderly ranks, sorted out innumerable pairs of gloves, and then swept the floor. He washed the cement floor with the hose, and while waiting for it to dry, he rinsed his brushes in turpentine. To tell the truth, Henry had found a few things in the rubbish which he had stored in his own pocket. The treasure consisted of, in this case, of a quantity of bent and rusty nails of all sizes, and a few screws and nuts. When Dr. McAllister returned at 6 o'clock, he found Henry corking up the turpentine and arranging the brushes on the shelf. "My word!" he exclaimed, staring at his garage with his mouth open. Then he threw back his head and laughed till his mother came down the walk to see what was the matter. "Look at my gloves, Mother," he said, wiping his eyes. "All mated up. They never met each other before, that I remember." Mrs. McAllister looked the garage over and observed the newly labeled drawers. Her son opened one of them and looked at his 4 hammers. "My tack hammer, Mother. Your tack hammer and 2 other hammers. That last one I never expected to see again. If you can use it, you may have it, my boy." Now, it is no exaggeration to say that at that moment, if Henry had been asked what he wanted most of anything in the world, he would have answered without any hesitation whatever, "A hammer." He accepted it gratefully, hardly able to stand still, so anxious was he to put it into use on the hill he called home. "Tomorrow is Sunday," said the doctor. "Shall I see you on Monday?" "Oh, yes," replied Henry, who had lost all track of the days. "The cherries need picking," said his new friend. "We could use any number of cherry-pickers, if they were all as careful as you." He gave him an odd look. "Could you?" asked Henry eagerly. "I'll surely come down." With that, he bade his friends good-bye and started for home, richer by another $1. 2 doughnuts the cook had given him, a pocket full of crooked nails, and the rest of the vegetables. When he reached his freight car home, a delicious savor greeted him. "Onions!" he shouted, running up to the kettle. The cook stood by and took off the cover and put in the salt. It was absolutely the most tantalizing odor that Henry had ever smelled. Years afterward, Jess tried to duplicate it with the same kettle, vegetables from the same garden, and all stirred with the same spoon, but it didn't equal this stew in flavor. "A ladle, as sure as I live," gasped Henry. Jess found a tin cup in the dump and fastened on a wooden handle with a bit of wire. When she ladled out 4 portions on 4 plates of all sizes, some of them tin, and laid the spoon in each, the children felt that the world held no greater riches. The tiny onions floated around like pearls. The carrots melted in your mouth, and the shreds of meat were as tender as possible from long boiling. A bit of bread in one hand helped the feast along wonderfully. The little wanderers ate until they could eat no more. "I have time before dark to make Benny's cart," observed Henry, biting a crisp, sweet carrot. "Oh, excuse me." "With my wheels?" asked Benny. "Yes, sir, with your wheels," agreed Henry. "Only when it's done, you'll have to cart stones in it." "Sure," said Benny with satisfaction. "Cart stones or anything." "We'll need it in making the dam," explained Henry for the benefit of his sisters. "Tomorrow's Sunday, so I shan't go to work in town. Do you think it's all right to build the pool on Sunday, Jess?" "I certainly do," replied Jess with emphasis. "We're just building the dam so we can keep it clean. I guess if Sunday is your only day off, it'll be all right." Henry's conscience was set at rest as he began with great delight to hammer out his bent nails. He and Benny ran about finding pieces of wood to fasten to the wheels. A visit to the dump was necessary at last in order to find just the right piece of timber for a tongue. But before it was too dark to see, Henry had pounded the last nail in place and trundled the flat cart back and forth just to see it go. The cart seemed valuable enough to all of them to take into the house for the night, and Henry could not afford to laugh at Benny for going to sleep with his hand upon one of his precious wheels, for he himself had tucked his new hammer under his pillow. Well, we are coming down to the last bit of it. I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to keep going until about 11 o'clock, and then we'll be finishing up the book tomorrow. So stick around. We're not done yet. Building the dam. Even a hammer makes a good pillow if one is tired enough. And the freight car family slept until 9 o'clock, till the 9 o'clock church bells began to ring faintly in the valley. There were at least a dozen churches, and their faraway bells sounded sweetly harmonious in so many different keys. "They almost play a tune," said Violet as she listened. "I like music all right," replied Henry in a businesslike way, "but I for one shall have to get to work." "This will be a good day to wash all the stockings," said Jess. "We'll all be wading so much in the brook anyway." After breakfast, the first thing Henry did was to survey with critical eyes the spot they had chosen for a pool. It was a hollow about 3 yards across. There were no stones in it at all. "It's big enough already," remarked Henry at last, "but it hasn't enough water in it." He measured its depth with a stick. "We'll have to guess at inches." "I have a little tape measure in my work bag," ventured his sister Violet. Henry flashed a smile at her. "Is there anything you haven't got in your work bag?" he asked her. The children measured the wet stick carefully. The water was just 10 inches deep in the deepest part. Henry explained his plan of engineering to his sisters. "We'll have to haul some big logs across the narrow part and stuff them from this end with stones and underbrush. It ought to be 3 feet deep before we get through." "Oh, Henry," protested Jess. "Benny would get drowned." "Drowned?" echoed Henry. "How tall do you think he is, anyhow?" They measured the little boy and found him to be 42 inches tall. That settled it. The pool was designed to be 3 feet in depth. Luckily, the largest logs were not far away, but as it was a matter of great labor for the builders to drag them to the scene of operations. "Let's get all the logs up here first," suggested Jess. "Then we can have the fun of laying them across." The 2 older children dragged all the logs while Violet and Benny attended to the stones, with the help of the cart. Occasionally, Henry was called upon to assist with heavy stone, but, for the most part, Benny puffed out his cheeks and heaved the stones himself. In fact, Henry decided at this point to let Benny drop them into the water as he gathered them. "Splash 'em right in, old fellow," he directed. "Only keep them in a nice straight line right across this place between these 2 trees. It won't make any difference how wet he gets," he added in an aside to Jess. "We can dry him in the sun." Jess thought a little differently, although she said nothing. She took off Benny's little crinkled blouse and 1 pair of bloomers and started to hang them on the line. "Good time to wash them," she exclaimed. "Let me wash them," begged Violet. "You're more useful building the dam." There was wisdom in this suggestion, so Jess accepted it gratefully, and even added Henry's blouse to the laundry. "When we finish the dam, they will surely be dry." As for Henry, he was only too glad to work without it. "Makes me feel lighter," he declared. Rare and beautiful birds came and watched the barefooted children as they scurried around building their wall of masonry. But the children did not have any eyes for birds then. They watched with delighted eyes as each stone was added to the wall under the clear water, and it began to rise almost to the surface. "That makes a solid foundation for the logs, you see," explained Henry with pride. "They won't be floating off downstream the minute we lay them on." Then at last the time arrived when they were to lay the logs on. "Let's wedge the first one between these two trees," said Jess with a happy thought. "Then, if each end of the log is on the upper side of the trees, the harder the water pounds, the tighter the dam gets." "Good work!" exclaimed Henry admiringly. "That's just what we'll do." But the children were not at all prepared for what happened the moment the first big log was splashed into its place on the top of the stone wall. The water, defeated in its course down the rocky bed, gurgled and chased about as it met the opposing log, and found every possible hole to escape. "Leaks," said Henry briefly, as the water began to rush around both ends and pour over the top of the log. "We'll make logs so thick it can't get through. We'll lay 3 logs across with 3 logs on top of them, and then 3 more on top of that." The children set about stubbornly to accomplish this. Violet held great sprays of fine underbrush in place until each log was laid. Wetter children were never seen, but nobody cared. They resolutely plunged the ends with more stones, more underbrush, and more logs. Each time a leak was discovered, someone dropped a stone over it. Even Benny caught the fever of conquering the mischievous water which slipped from their grasp like quicksilver. When the 3 top logs were at last dropped into place, the excited children sat down to watch the pool fill. This it did, slowly. Good Lord. Finding now no means of exit, the water was quieter. It rose steadily up the barricade of logs. It widened beautifully. Henry could not sit still. "It slopes," he cried. "See how clear it is, and how still? See how still it is?" And then the water began to overflow the logs. It spilled over the top with a delightful curve, and on the other side it formed a second waterfall. Not high and narrow and graceful like the natural fall above, but very low and wide, just like a regular mill dam, said Henry. He held the measuring stick out as far as he could and plunged it into the water. It lacked an inch of being 3 feet deep. "Deep enough," he declared. In fact, it looked so deep that Benny could not conceal a slight fear. "That's the beauty of the slope," observed Jess. "Benny can wade in just as far as he wants to, and no farther. We all know what the bed of the pool is like, no holes or stones." The girls had to leave to prepare dinner, but Henry could not be persuaded to leave the wonderful swimming pool. "I'd rather swim than eat," he said. Luckily for the children, their supply of provisions was the largest of any day since their flight. The girls lighted the fire and heated up the remainder of the stew and cut the bread. The butter, hard and cold in the refrigerator, was taken out, and 4 portions cut from it. The 2 doughnuts made 4 half-rings for dessert. The cooks rang the dinner bell. This was an ingenious arrangement hung on a low branch. It consisted of a piece of bent steel swung on a string. Violet hit it sharply with another piece of steel. It sounded deeply and musically through the woods, and the boys understood it and obeyed at once. It was evident the moment they appeared that at least 3 of the family had been swimming. Watch shook himself violently at intervals, spattering water drops in all directions. Henry and Benny, fresh and radiant with splattered hair and clean dry stockings and blouses, apparently liked to swim and eat too. "You can actually swim a few strokes in it, Jess, if you're careful," Henry said with excusable pride as he sat down to dinner. Building a dam is wonderful sauce for a dinner. I think stew is much better the second day, observed Benny, eating hungrily. There remained 2 more adventures for the eventful day. The girls cut their hair. Violet's dark curls came off first. They're awfully in the way, explained Violet, and so much trouble when you're working. They were tangled, too, and Jess cut them off evenly by a string, with Violet's little scissors. Jess's chestnut hair was long and silky and nicely braided, but she never murmured as it came off, too. The 2 girls ran to the brook mirror to see how they looked. The new haircut was very becoming to both. I like you better that way, said Henry approvingly. Lots more sensible when you're living in the woods. Around 4 o'clock, the children took a long walk in the opposite direction from any of their other explorations. They were rewarded by 2 discoveries. One was a hollow tree literally filled with walnuts, gathered presumably by a thrifty squirrel the previous fall. The other discovery frightened them a little just at first. For with bristling back and a loud bark, Watch suddenly began to rout out something in the leaves, and that something began to cackle and half run and half fly from the intruders. It was a runaway hen. The children succeeded in catching the dog and reducing him to order, although it was clear he liked very much to chase hens. She's had some eggs, too, remarked Benny, as if trying to make pleasant conversation. Jess bent over incredulously and saw a rude nest in the moss in which there were 5 eggs. A runaway hen, said Henry, hardly believing his eyes. She wants to hide her nest and raise chickens. The children had no scruples at all about taking the eggs. Almost a gift from heaven, said Violet, stroking one of the eggs with a delicate finger. It wouldn't be polite to refuse them. Scrambled eggs made a delicious supper for the children. Jess broke all the eggs into the biggest bowl and beat them vigorously with a spoon until they were light and foamy. Then she added milk and salt and delegated Violet to beat them some more while she prepared the fire. The big kettle, empty and clean, was hung over the low fire, and butter was dropped in. Jess watched it anxiously, tipping the kettle slightly in all directions. When the butter had reached the exact shade of brown, Jess poured in the eggs and stirred them carefully, holding her skirts away from the fire. She was amply repaid for her care when she saw her family attack the meal. Clearly, this was a feast today. We shall have to be satisfied tomorrow to live on bread and milk, she observed, scraping the last delicious morsel. But when tomorrow came, they had more than bread and milk, as you will soon see. All right. Well, that is halfway through the book, and I think that is a perfect place to take a pause. I am so grateful that there are so many of you here right now. That's freaking amazing. Now, tomorrow we'll be back on at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same place. We will do this again, and I am so grateful that all of you are here. To everybody that's just joining us and just here for the first time, welcome. This is a great space, a community of caring and kind people who just want to come in and listen to a story. I am glad to report that we take care of each other, and kindness is just how we do things. It's always good with all the crazy shit going on in the world right now. It's nice to have a place to sit back and relax for a couple of hours and just listen to a story. Yana, yes, this can be rewatched on the tubes. I am available on the tubes with the same username, UndeadPapa. Yeah, so that stuff is usually posted automatically up there. I don't take it down. Yeah, so all right. Well, and that's where we will leave our story for tonight. Doug, this is a classic of children's literature. It's called The Boxcar Children. It's about four kids who run away from home and end up living in an antique boxcar. It's been around for a long time. It is public domain, and yeah, it's a great book. I'll be continuing and finishing the book tomorrow. Like I said, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For those of you that are new, I go live 4 times a week: Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern to 11 p.m. Eastern, all 4 nights. Try to be consistent. Sundays and Mondays are generally children's literature, and Wednesdays and Fridays are for strange, dark, and mysterious. So we read a lot of horror and a lot of classic horror and science fiction. Yeah. So I don't have a book picked out for Wednesday yet, or stories for picked up, but I will, and I might show you tomorrow. So we'll see. Yeah. So this is great. You guys are frick 70. Holy jumping Jehoshaphat. We are at 18,300 followers. What? 600,000 likes? Holy poopy. I'm trying not to swear because I don't know who's here with kids. Jeez Louise. You guys are killing me. No, so there's 1,700 more of you, so I'll just kind of give you a little roll up of what's happened. So last July, we're coming up on a year, I got laid off from my regular job. And, I did what everybody does. You file for unemployment, you go looking and everything, and jobs were not there, man. It's crazy. So in August, I got on a Sunday night and started reading a story. And, people loved it. And they came back the following Sunday. Then I decided to add Wednesday. Then we decided to add Friday. Then we decided, most recently, we added Monday. And when I started, no lie, when I started this back in August, I was at 2,300 followers. And now I'm sitting at 18,349. Less than a year later. Yeah. It has been an absolute privilege to read stories to you guys for almost a year now. And we're just going to keep growing. And the more people listen to the stories, the more we grow. And I can't do this without you. So I am absolutely indebted to all of you and grateful for all of you. To answer the question, I don't know if it's been asked, but yes, I am a professional voice actor and audiobook narrator. I have a couple of books out on Audible. I haven't finished my website yet, which there will be listed. I'm actually finishing an audiobook right now, and I'll be starting another one probably in the next couple weeks. But yeah, so I do this professionally. But this is, honestly, at this point, this is just fun for me. I love bringing back memories for people. I love getting to know all of my regulars. I have made friendships. This is what social media is about. Carolyn, so how do I choose the books? Well, what name do you search on Audible? It's going to be under Jeremy Thompson, Jeremy Thompson. A couple of the books that you might want to look up. The first one is Nexus Point. It's Nexus Point. And then the other one is Banebirth, Banebirth. It is a fantastic book by an author who is here on TikTok. His name is Gabriel J. Smith, and he was an absolute blast to work with, and we're looking forward to working together again later this year. You're very welcome, Crazy Mama. So, yeah, I'm trying to keep up with the chat. You guys are rolling by pretty quick here, but why the new username UndeadPapa? Well, I have been a proud father, girl dad, for the last 20 years, almost 21 years, and I love zombies. So UndeadPapa kind of, just kind of stuck. But yeah, this community is a great bunch of people. We've got our own inside jokes, and everybody just gets along and is happy. So I'm thrilled that you're all here. I really appreciate that. All right. I do have one rule. Well, two rules. Be kind while you're in here. That's this space. We protect this space. And two, we don't talk politics. I don't care what your affiliations are in here. When you're in here, you're just another human being. That's it. New York City. No, I am in Rochester, New York, which is smack dab between Syracuse and Buffalo. We are in what we call Western New York. The home of the greatest pizza ever. Just so you know, we have the best pizza in the country. Fight me. I was born near Utica. Ilion, New York is where I was. So, but yeah. Well, thank you all. I am going to call it a night. I can feel my voice giving out already. Does live streaming pay my bills? Not by a long shot. Not by a long shot. Doing audiobooks definitely is more so my bread and butter. But I record during the day and I come on here 4 nights a week, and I do this more to relax and have some sanity. That's really what it is. Audiobooks for who? I don't know, whatever authors pay me. I wish I could say that that's not true, but it is. If they're willing to pay me, I'm willing to read whatever they want. Within reason, of course. Within reason. Megan, Marilyn. So there's a little bit here and there with gifts during the live. I also have some subscribers to my channel and some super fans as well. I'm happy. I was actually just going to get to that part. So if you do enjoy these stories and would like to help support what I do here, please consider subscribing or becoming a super fan. So I get enough people as super fans, and I'm going to start doing some little pre-live stuff, where it's just the super fans that can come in until it's time to go regular live, and then everybody can come in. I will never paywall the stories. That's just and the super fan and subscriber stuff is more so about helping support what I do here. I use the money from the gifts and the subscriptions and super fans to help buy the ebooks that I use for these. So schedule is 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Yeah, and you know what? I don't like New York City pizza. And I'll tell you why. I shouldn't have to fold my pizza in half in order to eat it. I want my pizza to have a little structural integrity. I know, I'm a pizza snob. But anyway. Well, I really appreciate all of you. I will see you tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're followed, go to my page and turn on notifications to make sure you get notified when I go live. I also create a live event that you can actually register for, and that will give you notifications as well. I'll be doing an intro video again, I guess, because holy crap. You guys have made my night. I love all of you. So until tomorrow, please be kind to each other. and be kind to yourself, because kindness matters. And so do you. Good night, everybody.